Well, since Gladiator has influenced a lot of movie makers to make a lot of ancient history movies, I'm just going to review the next one in the list. And this isn't a part of a movie series review, but I just might as well review other ancient movies because Gladiator has influenced a lot of other directors and writers and actors to make their own ancient movies in terms of, historical accuracy and historical stories. So, 4 years later, after the year 2000, Warner Brothers decided to make another movie based off of ancient history. It may not be based on the ancient Romans, but it might as well just be based on the ancient Greeks. Troy is a 2004 epic historical film directed by Wolfgang Petersen, and it's based off the classic story of the ancient Greeks that took over Troy, which is related to the Iliad by the ancient Greek philosopher Homer. And it stars Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, Orlando Bloom, Peter O'Toole, Diane Krueger, and so many other roles. And as I stated, this movie is about the Trojan Wars that happened between the Greeks and the Trojans and who were involved. And based on the key points of this movie is mostly focused on the ancient Greek hero named Achilles and his journey through the Iliad. And basically, he is the greatest and fiercest warrior of all of Greece, and no one dares to challenge him. And then later one day, Odysseus decides to invite him to fight for Greece in order to take over Troy. And Achilles is very, very uncertain about fighting because he only cares about the fame. He doesn't care about the king, but he decides to go on this journey just to get more recognition and fame of all ancient Greece. So he goes on this journey to fight off the Trojans, and then later he eventually meets up with the Trojans, which is Prince Hector and Prince Paris, and it also does explore about how the Trojans had to defend the wall of Troy. And as far as things go, a lot of chaos breaks in. You got the very famous scenes that happened within the Iliad. These were very important, specific scenes that happened, and they decided to put it in this movie. And then you also get the reasoning and motivations behind the kings of Greece on why they wanted to go to Troy, because, Prince Paris stole Helen of Menelaus, Helen of Sparta to be exact, from the Greeks and the Spartans. And of course the kings get angry and they vow for revenge. So they're off to war, and then Troy has to defend itself for once as well. Troy is actually a really, really interesting movie. I think it is one of those movies where you can actually feel as if you're an ancient Greek yourself, and that also has to go from the way how Wolfgang Petersen directed, because I believe that he did an amazing job in directing his actors and filming everything, with his cinematography and his location shooting, which I thought was really cool. And I also found it cool how he, choreographed the battle scenes. I thought the battle scenes were pretty cool. But at the same time, this movie does have a few flaws, which I will get into later. But the first thing I'd like to critique are the positive things. And one of the greatest things that I really love about this movie is just being within the moment of ancient Greece and the Trojan War. Because once you watch this movie, you can really see Homer's Iliad really come to life. You can feel as if you're an ancient Greek yourself living in ancient Greece, or being an ancient Greek yourself fighting in the Battle of Troy, or you can be a Trojan defending the Trojan Wall. And that's what this film does. It makes everyone feel as if they're in the moment. Every actor is their character. Every actor becomes, the famous characters from the Iliad, and I'm really happy that we got to see the Iliad come to life. Based on the pros of this movie, the greatest thing that this movie has to offer is just, having wonderful set designs, because the set designs of this movie are just fantastic. I mean, they shot this movie, in the beach when the Greeks arrive in Troy, in the Trojan beach, and then later you got, how they filmed the battle scenes, and then later you got the walls of Troy, and you really feel as if this is how Troy was back in the ancient times. And it's really brought to life, and of course there's a little bit of CGI involved, but they're in the big wide shots, and the CGI does not feel as if it's overused and stuff. And I was surprised that this movie mostly has practical effects, especially in regards to the Trojan horse, which is also pulled out of a famous scene out of the Iliad. And I really love how the Trojan horse looked like. It's wooden, it's a model, and it really does look amazing. And it looks like the way how I would really picture a Trojan horse from Homer's interpretation of how he thought of, or how he interpreted the Trojan War. Another thing I could actually give a pro to is the costume design, because the costume design is just fantastic. They look incredibly beautiful, and they look as if you really are in the ancient Greek society or the ancient Trojan society, because they do reflect of how the ancient civilizations dressed up around that time. And I really also enjoyed the way how they made the armor of this movie. I have to say, the armor is just really, really cool and fascinating. And I also loved how all these like soldiers put on their own armor and how they would set it up in terms of like preparing for battle and stuff like that. And I thought it was just really, really cool. And I also love how they dressed up almost everybody, because everybody is almost, an ancient citizen within a society, whether it's Greece or Troy. And there is nothing wrong or something to complain about the costumes, because the costuming is just awesome. This movie also has an excellent soundtrack by the late James Horner, and James Horner is a composer I really, really miss dearly. I miss him very, very much, as he was one of the greatest composers of our generation for movies and cinema. And from the way that he wrote his music, I felt like it could have been better, in my opinion. And the music does have a very catchy tune, and I really love how he tried to make it as mighty as he could, but I wish that there was more, influence, if you know what I mean. I wish there was more melodical tunes and more of a theme. And although there are themes, it's just a little bit of like high and low, but it wasn't as flexible as I thought it was going to be. But overall, it's still music I feel very impacted by, and I feel as if, it's representing the mightiness of the ancient Greeks and how ancient, I mean, not how ancient, but how mighty and powerful they were as a nation at the time. And I also love the ending song and the end credits by Josh Groban, Remember Me. That I believe it's a beautiful song. And a little fun fact is that James Horner was not the original composer for this movie. It was supposed to be Gabriel Yared, but they rejected his score, and I have to say I kind of prefer the rejected score a bit more, but some of the producers or maybe Warner Brothers thought it was too traditional. But I have to say that I appreciate more of Gabriel Yared's score. Again, that's just my opinion, but overall the music is also a good centerpiece for this movie, as it does point out motifs for each situation that happens throughout the movie. This movie also does feature a lot of, talented actors, with Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, Orlando Bloom, all those big names. And I have to say, they gave out pretty good performances, I could say the least. And I really love how devoted they were to their characters and how they had to represent the characters. And you can tell with the amount of training and with the amount of stunt work that they had to do for certain characters like Achilles and Hector. They had to nail it down, and they had to get the choreography right for the fights. And I have to say, the fights are very brutal, because this is a very mature film, as it does feature a lot of, graphic battle sequences. But in terms of acting physically and, showing emotions, they're amazing at that. But basically, about this film, this kind of leads me a bit to my flaws. And although the acting is not bad, the acting can seem a little awkward at times. And I'm not trying to say that they gave out terrible performances, but there were some lines that I felt were a little eh. And then later, as they were acting, they had to try out these, weird accents that really did not work out. And it doesn't really sound British, but some type of weird accent like, spare the gods for me, those type. It's a little awkward. It's not terrible, but that's a thing that was a bit of a flaw, whenever they're making a historical movie, they just have to come up with this British or some type of accent where they're like, can you do this for the gods? Or is there no one else, Another flaw that was for this movie is something that I have to correlate, and that is the plot structure and the adaptation from the source material of the Iliad. And I have to say, it's a little mixy-uppy and a little jumbly from time to time. From the first act to the third act, you get big action scenes, you get the beginning and the ending. And of course, as the rising action goes, you get the motivations behind what happened during the Trojan War. But I think my biggest issue is the way how they handled the second act, or the climax, about how things go. And although scene after scene they do focus and they do have motivation, I feel like they're a little jumbled, like this character does this and this character does that, and then later you get like, okay, this happens because of this happens because of that. And of course it's trying to interpret like how the Trojan War connected all of these, characters from the Iliad, and how they wanted them to how they were involved and how each character played their own part. And it's not a confusing movie, but it's some type of narrative that's probably going to bother people. Oh, and for me, I understood it. I wasn't entirely bothered by, the way that they handled their plot structure, but from the way that it was handled, it was just a little, not maybe not to be as brutal, just say it was messy, but I'm not gonna say it's messy. It's a little harsh, but it was just a little all over the place, especially in the second act. And the other flaw I have to kind of critique, and this is just relating to someone who's read the Iliad, is that this movie does change a lot of things from the Iliad, and it does alter a lot of historical facts that is very dedicated to Homer's interpretation and writing. And basically they change, a lot of scenes, and I know people are going to say, well, movies can change a lot of things. And based on how important the Iliad was, and especially how, how not just how amazing, but how iconic those scenes were from the book, they made major changes, and they try to and the changes do feel a little cliche from time to time. And those are things that are just my flaws for this movie. Is just, the plot structure and the interpretation of the Iliad. And from the way how they interpreted, or how they have the movie inspired by how the way the Iliad was interpreting the Trojan War. But it's a pretty decent, good job, not terrible, but and especially because this is not an easy interpretation to make, as the Iliad was an ancient source material from thousands of years ago. But despite the flaws that I've stated, I still think Troy is a very, very interesting movie, and I still appreciate the way how they wanted to interpret ancient source material into a movie. And I really, I really respect the way how, these movie makers and the directors and the producers and the writers try to pull off interpretation of the Iliad. And I hope I wasn't too rough, like I said. And I still think this is a movie that's worth your time. And based on what I said, there's still a lot of good stuff besides the flaws. Those are just, those are just my personal flaws with the movie. And I still think that people should just go check it out and see this movie for themselves, and to get a little background on how it was for ancient history. But based on everything I've stated, I think Troy deserves maybe, a 7.9 out of 10, almost a B. I know I'm a little weird on the way how I grade my movies, but 7.9 isn't too bad for Troy. Well, that's it for the review. I am incredibly happy I uploaded another video, as you can tell, because like what I said earlier, I'm just incredibly busy nowadays due to schoolwork, but I am just super happy that I had the effort to make another movie review for y'all, because video making is something I really enjoy and I do not want to lose that passion. So thank you very much, and please be sure to subscribe as always for more videos coming up soon.